Hey guys, good afternoon. So the day has come to deal with this carburetor issue on this old Chrysler. This is a 66 Chrysler 300 non-letter car with a 383B engine in it. It's got a Carter AFB carburetor. It's right there. So brief recap, put all this together several months ago and just been tying up loose ends with this. And one of the issues that I ran into with this car was that the carburetor tends to flood after I shut it down when it's hot. Well, it's very warm to hot. It's operating temperature and it heat soaks for a while. Evidently the carburetor is getting hot and it's something that's going on with the fuel in there. It's boiling, it's bubbling, it's forcing it out where it's not supposed to come out at. So I think we got a couple of issues going on. Number one, we got too much heat drawn into the carburetor itself. That's a big old carburetor and it has no insulator except for a little small paper gasket on the bottom. And the second thing is we may have an issue with one or both of our floats. I rebuilt this carburetor a few months ago completely and the floats look good, but as I remember, I checked the float levels on them, but that doesn't mean anything. I could have done it wrong. So I hear a train coming. So anyway, we need to get that carburetor off there, and I've gotten some new needles and seats to put on it and a new insulator to put down there. So first things first, let's take that carburetor off. Are you timing me to see how long this is going to take? I thought I was going to speed you up, but I don't think so. Here you go. Okay, I'll show you what's on the bottom there, as I was talking about the insulator, or the lack of. This is all there is, just a paper gasket. So anyway, I've got 2 new ones. I had to order them, of course. Whoops, sorry about that. Anyway, here it is. So just a thin paper gasket, and there's plenty of meat on these bolts here to add an insulator, which you'll be seeing that. But I see one thing I did wrong when I put this on. I put it on backwards. The holes from front to rear are just a little bit larger than the front ones. It's supposed to be like that. See there? Oh, dumb A. You can see the carburetor, the imprint on it where it had the larger open. Yeah, okay. Whatever. Okay, so got the carburetor over here. I'm going to bring the tripod over and get you guys set up, and we'll explore this thing. Okay then, let's get cracking the top off of this thing. And it's not very hard to do. You got clip here you got to take loose for the accelerator pump. You got to take this pull off of here so you can undo the link up here. And of course you got, let's see, you're going to have another link back here. You can take a flathead screw out right here on this end. Remember that this arm points forward when you get ready to put this all back together. And what else? We're going to go ahead and pull that thing off too. So, alright, so hang you up just a little there. Better. Alright, here we go. Okay, first thing we need to do is we need to measure the float height, as they call it. And on these, it's pretty simple to do. 2 floats, 2 measurements. So you leave the gasket, the air horn gasket in place, and you measure this distance between the gasket and the toe of the float right here, just where it starts to flatten out on each one of them. And the measurement on this one is supposed to be 7/32, and I know a lot of them say 7/16. But I'm going to read you right out of the book here. Let's see. Our carburetor number is 4131S. So we're going to go over here to this out of the book. And that's AFB 4131S. It's automatic. 383 and 440. You can come down here and the float setting 7/32. That way all the way across the board, and then we're going to do the float drop here also. I'll show you that in just a second. But what I had to do is I usually use they call it a gauge, but you can use a drill bit. I didn't happen to have a 7/32 drill bit. It's kind of an odd size unless you got one of these large drill bit kits I don't have. So I just went through, took my calipers and went through my toolbox until I found something that was approximately the same size. And so that's this. So we're going to use that for our measuring tool. And all we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to slide this in right there. And we want to make sure that it does not sits right on it. It's right on it perfectly. It's flat on the thing, so if I move it any, it raises the float up. You see how the ridges are almost right on it. So that one's fine. And we're going to come look at this one the same way. Right under where it starts to turn flat. Make sure it's right there. Perfect. So the floats, the original floats, that's what those are, and they are just fine. So whatever our issue is or was is not being caused by the floats being out of adjustment that way. So what we need to do now is we need to check the float drop, which means we got to what they call invert the air horn and let these floats kind of hang in midair, and we're going to measure how far down they hang. All right, so we step back over here, book. I showed you about the float drop. The setting on it is 3/4 of an inch. And let me back through this a little bit. I'm just going to give you the instructions for doing that, because this is kind of an obsolete type of a thing you do. But you can look here, checking float drop, and it's quite simple. You just what they call invert the air horn, which means you put it back the way like it would be on the carburetor on the engine, and you have the gasket in place, and then you measure from this point, the gasket surface, to this point here, which is just back from the end of the float right there, almost where that first little indentation is. So to me they looked a little bit low, but we're just looking at them by eye. So I'm going to set you back in the stand here and hopefully give you a view of this, what we're going to do. So what I did was I took one of these little included paper ruler things, and I cut off 3/4 of an inch of it. So we use that for my measuring apparatus. I'm not quite sure how to get you guys in here where you can see very well, but let's try that. So I'm going to measure right here. Push the gasket surface up, and it's right on it. That one's fine. You can see it went in just fine, and there's no real, just a little bit of room there, but not enough to even fool with. I mean, you don't have to be, this is not launching a rocket or something. We just need to be we just need to be as close in the ballpark as we can. So, so let's take a look at this one. And I'm going to try to come back in here, see if I can do this. I'm sure I checked all this before. That's not doing a very good job of that, but I'll try this one. Pushing the carburetor over. All right. Yep. It's a little bit rougher to get to the right spot there. A little bit rougher to do this one. It's not as easy one-handed, but it's right on it. So our float adjustments are correct. So that's not it. That's not any kind of issue. So I'm going to go get what I bought. I'm going to show you guys what we're going to do to hopefully, since our float level's okay, we're going to change out these needle and seat assemblies for another kind. Okay, then here's what we're going to do. I ordered a set of these off-road spring-loaded needles and seats, the assemblies, and they're pretty reasonable. And they go in an AFB and an AVS and any kind of Elderbrock carburetor, just about. So show you what the difference is in them. The seats are essentially the same. We don't have to worry about looking at those yet. But if I take out one of these that I already have in there, this is just your simple regular old needle assembly. It's got, there's no spring loaded to it. It's got a place for a clip on it, and I don't remember there being any kind of clips in here. So that's what would go around this little thing right there. But this thing otherwise it's just free to move up and down on its own initiative. And what I'm afraid is happening is I'm afraid that when this float acts on here, you see there's a little shiny spot right there. Oops, where are we? Right there. Anyway, you see there's a shiny spot on the top of that float right there in the center, right there. So that's what pushes up on the end of this, that part right there, so to speak. And the thing is if this float's moving around, then this needle assembly just reacts to that immediately. And the idea is that you take one of these guys, which is you have another needle assembly like this that's got a hole in the end of it, and then it has a spring, a little tiny spring here that goes in there like so. Fits down in there. And then you have the other piece, like a little plunger that goes in. If I can show that, you're going to just put it in like that, carefully. Put it in there, and then it has springing ability. Springability. If I push on this, so what happens is now the float is free to bounce around more, bounce around. It's free to bounce around, move around, and if the fuel is trying to percolate, my theory is that somebody, and it wasn't really my theory, somebody on the internet talked about this, and I kind of believed them. So the float's moving around and all this, no matter what's going on, but this is going to allow it to maintain pressure on the needle and keep it closed regardless of whether the float's moving very much. I mean, it's not going to, it's got to open at some point, but it's still going to hopefully mitigate that. So I've got a couple seats here. I'm probably just going to go ahead and change these out. I think they're exactly the same, but they're new in the new gasket. So we'll look and make sure. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to change those both out and swap them out. And I've stood here while I've been talking to you trying to puzzle out how that's going to affect the float setting. So we're going to have to find that out. I have to think about that, how that works. Because I guess we're going to measure them, just, we're going to push them all the way down, gently push them till the plunger bottoms and then see where our float setting is, because we don't want our baseline float height setting to change, because that's going to cause problems with the you just don't want to do that. It has to remain the same. So I'm going to work on that a little bit. I got to puzzle that out, and then I'm going to come back and I'll show you what I did about that. I can tell you right now, this float's going to have to be adjusted, because it's in and it's laying on the gasket. It ain't going to work. So get busy doing that. Alright, so we're done here with this, and this took quite a bit of modification to these floats and to the carburetor itself to a small degree to get the settings back where they were, because these are just not just a drop-in affair. I mean, they do drop in, but like the motel. But when you use these, it changes your float settings drastically, so you have to go back and set the float height and then set the float drop, and that all changes. So that's changed so much. I'm going to carry I'm going to carry this little measuring thing and these old floats and seats, needles and seats, with me as part of the toolkit for the car. So if I have trouble on the road with it, I can use those if need be, if something were to happen here with this. Hopefully not, but I think at the same token, I'm going to order a new pair of floats for it. That way that I have a set that I can adjust, for one set. That sounds silly, but for the standard needles and seats, and then have these for this, because it's a lot of work. I mean, it's not something you want to really do on the side of the road if you don't have to. So I think that's what we're going to do. But in the meantime, we're ready to go back together with this. I'm going to clean that goop out of there where I have to seal that up, and we're going to put this carburetor back together. Just drop the top back on it and put the screws in and hook the linkages up, just like I showed you, in reverse. Okay, then second stage of what we're going to do is put this carburetor all together now. We're going to put on a spacer, heat insulator. This is what I got. Like that. This time I remember that the rear is a little bit larger than the front. And I also picked up two gaskets for it, one for underneath and one for over between it and the carburetor. Okay, let's go over and put that on. Here's something slightly noteworthy. So I bought two of these base plate gaskets. They are Felpro number 60015, and I bought two from two different places. And not only did one come in a plastic wrapper and the other come in a Felpro box, one of them has front just ink stamped on it right there, and then the other one has front actually physically stamped into it. And they're slightly different colors, and if you look at the edges of them, the edges look different. So there's no real difference in them, I wouldn't think, but that one's not made as cleanly, doesn't look like. But the cheapo, I think this came out of the rebuild kit that I had for that carburetor, but it didn't have anything printed on it. It's just nothing. Just a flimsy piece of junk. Alright. Okay, first thing to do is put one base plate on, make gasket on, make sure that front goes to front. Put a spacer on, make sure that front goes to front. It's not marked, but the holes are, dadgum, the holes are slightly larger on the rear. So otherwise it shouldn't make any difference. This is phenolic, they call it. Drops right on. Alright, one more gasket. Front goes to front. Alright. Introduce our carburetor and see if we got enough bolts left. Bolt space. Be close. Just barely. Alright, well, that is a little too barely, so I'm gonna have to back those out a little bit if they come out. That's a revolting development. Alright, so I had thought that I had some long carb studs. I got the old ones out without drama. That was fortunate. They're too short, and I thought I had some extra long ones from another project, and I dug through and looked in this box, helpfully labeled vacuum trees and carb studs, and I found them. I found 3 of them. So that's not gonna work. Can't do that. So we're just gonna have to use bolts on this. And I'll put these in here. Just remember what they are. 2 shouldn't be any problem because they are blue or teal. And anyway, that's that. So I'll spend an hour or so looking through all my bolts to find the right ones for it. But I'm going to do that tomorrow, guys. It's getting a little bit late in the day. I've had a long one, so I'm going to hang it up for tonight, and we'll come back to this tomorrow. And we got to finish this up, and we got to try to insulate that fuel line that's laying on the engine right there. And also another project, I ordered a temperature gauge for this, so I'm going to put that in, a mechanical temperature gauge. And I had to look and look and look to get one I like the looks of and all that. I think we're going to do the temperature gauge installation on a separate video, so I don't want to get too much on this one. But I hear the train coming, like Johnny Cash said, so time for me to wrap this up, and we'll pick back up on it tomorrow. One of the 3 amigos, I have 3 chimney swifts that live here with me. Well, guys, it is Sunday, about mid-morning, and I'm going to wrap this one up here. I didn't really want to. I want to proceed further, but I got the marching orders this week where I got to be this week for work, and that is going to be in Atlanta for 5 days straight. I have to leave today at noon, and I won't be back till Friday. Isn't that awesome? So let's put a crimp in this, and I'm getting, of course, I'm getting down to the wire on this. I have to get this thing going because we got a car show the 16th, and I want to be there. So I got a little over 2 weeks, right at about 2 weeks actually. So this has to be done. So carburetor is back on with its spacer. And what I ended up doing with the studs there is I took them all out. They came out easily, thankfully. But I looked around and I couldn't find bolts that looked good or I liked or anything like that, and the other studs were too long. So I didn't want to go through all that mess, so I just put these back in and just left them. I didn't bottom them out. So it seems to be working fine. I think that's going to be okay. We're not trying to hold a part of a dam in place with these, so it'll be fine. So that's on, everything's hooked back up, linkage back on, yada yada. I hope it works. I want to show you something real quick. I think Howard also explained this, or maybe he didn't, but he was talking about his carburetor, his Rochester. This is not a Rochester, this is a Carter. But you notice we've got 4 vent tubes, and these go right into where the float bowls are. Float bowls are on either side here, and you notice they have these little holes in them that goes directly into that passage. Do you know why that is? Do you really? Well, I'll tell you why that is. That is really an air bleed for those, because that is to prevent them from creating a siphon. In other words, if there's like a low pressure area at the ends of those, if that was not there, then it could create a vacuum type of a deal, and it could start pulling fuel out of the float bowls. I'll get it out eventually. So that's on. That's on. Fuel line's back together, and I insulated this fuel line with some home things I had, which means a piece of fuel line that is split, and I did the best I could with it. It was against the engine, so There's got some spaces in it still, but that fuel line will not bend that sharp. So we're going to try that. If that doesn't work, we'll have to go with something else. It doesn't have the desired effect. But there's a lot going on right here in this space of this engine. There's a fuel line coming up which bends right around the engine. I don't know why they insisted on that, but they did. And so it follows the contours of the engine and goes up. And then we've got hoses, distributor cap, wires, brackets, you name it. It's pretty tight. So that's that. We're going to see if that helps that any. I'm not sure that was a problem, but it can't hurt it because it was laying on the engine, so picking up engine heat. And those, you know you wanted to see that. You know you did. Just go ahead and admit it now. You wanted to see somebody do that. That's an old-time supposed remedy for vapor lock, is to put clothespins on the fuel line. It's supposed to be like a heat sink, kind of draw the heat away. I don't know. But it's period correct, though, either way. You're really not going to see it because that huge old air cleaner is on top of all that. But we'll see. Looks funny anyway, doesn't it? So, anyway, guys, that's about it. I hate that I have to cut this short today. I feel like on days like this, I just don't get anything done because most of the time I don't. But next weekend, when I hit the ground running on this thing, and get my temperature gauge in and put the battery back in, and we're going to get it on the road and see what happens. And then I've got to make time one way or another somehow to get the exhaust done on it. If that doesn't happen, I'm just going to take it to the car show sounding like a dump truck, but that's all I can do, man. Wanted to show you this real quick. Picked up a temperature gauge and got this, ordered this off the internet. This is a mechanical gauge. You can go in there. That car does not have a gauge. It has a little light on, and I mean it's a little small little light by the speedometer that's got two parts to it. Left side is green, says cold. Right side is red, says hot. And I like that. I think that looks nice. It's neat, but I don't drive cars without temperature gauges, period, because I feel like that by the time a hot light comes on, if it comes on, we don't know that it works. I don't know that the sender's any good on this. I mean, the green part comes on, but I don't know about the hot part, and I don't want to know about the hot part. Because, you know, the thing about a heat light like that is, I don't know when a lot of them are set to come on or start lighting up or whatever, but, you know, it's hot. By the time it comes on, it's hot. It's not getting there. It's hot. So I don't do warning lights. So this one runs off a sender, which is right there. And so I got to pull the hose off again to get to that. Try and cool it out. Wish I'd done this first time around, but I didn't, of course. But anyway, so I picked up this temperature gauge, and it's mechanical, as I said. I don't want to fool with any kind of wiring. And I like it. I wanted one that wouldn't clash with the interior of the car, so I didn't have anything that's got white face gauge on it, or any kind of orange needles, or any kind of this or any kind of that. I wanted an old black and white temperature gauge, and that's what I got. And especially I wanted this one because, as you see, 180 is straight up top, and then it goes to 260. Starts out at 100, all the way around to 260, and I think that's an excellent spread on it because I looked at temperature gauge after gauge after gauge on the internet, and for whatever reason, all of them that I could find just about had, it'd come up like 100, and then 180 be right here at like 9 o'clock, and then it'd be 200, and then you had like all this stuff goes way out. You have like 220, 240, 260, 280. I'm thinking, why in the world have you got the normal spot all the way over here to the left? Is there a reason for that? So I didn't like that. I said I wanted 180 right up about right top up there, so that I can just glance down at the gauge, and if it's up around the middle part of it, I know we're running pretty cool. So, you know, pretty normal temperature. I don't want it to be over here and then, you know, have to peer at these crunched up graphics on those guys. That's a stupid idea to me. Of course, my ideas don't mean much, but got that, and then picked up a cheapo gauge holder. That's going to go under the dash, and we'll just find a way to mount it with some existing bolts, hopefully. So that's that, and that's going to go in and do that. and we're gonna roll with that, guys, and that's gonna be it. We're gonna have to do what we did with the Plymouth though, where we're just gonna have to put it on the road and drive it and see what happens. Try to drive it for a week. So that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up. I wanted to talk about one other thing pretty quickly, not get on a big tear about it, but I got some bad news yesterday off of YouTube. Hit me pretty hard. The YouTuber, his name is Aussie50. He's from obviously Australia, and he's a real tinker, engineering type of fix it, modify it, break it, build it type of guy. This sort of stuff I like to watch. And unfortunately, he took his life a few days ago for whatever reasons, and you know, that's a shock. I don't like to hear stuff like that. You know, that's you know, just getting to a point where you feel like the only option is to end your life. That's bad. So I don't know what his exact circumstances were, but I know he had reduced a lot of his video making in the last year or so, and then he made a video sometime back about something, and then he mentioned in there that he was not, you know, YouTube wasn't what it used to be and all this. And I'd heard that before from different people, and I just kind of dismissed it. But, you know, I think sometimes, you know, I'm not trying to blame anybody, but I think sometimes when people say YouTube is not what it used to be, I think they're really saying they're not who they used to be, or their life is not what it used to be, and just kind of bringing YouTube into it. So whatever the situation, you know, like I said, that hit me hard, and I feel bad about that. And if you're ever in a situation where something's wrong and you know it's wrong, or somebody's telling you something's wrong, you're acting, you know, strange or whatever's going on. Here's the thing about mental illness, you know, especially, you know, anybody that, I'm no expert on it, I'm not a licensed therapist or anything of the sort, but I've been around folks that have struggled with things like that. And the thing about mental illness is that you can't just tell the person, well, you just need to do this different. You need to think differently. You need to act differently, and expect that to have any kind of effect on them, because they're not capable. When you have a mental illness, you're not capable of understanding that what you're doing or what you're saying or how you're feeling is wrong. That's just that's how it is. It's how your day is. It's how you feel, you know. You don't realize, I guess, until something's wrong, until you know, you either take therapy or medicine or whatever, and you're cured, or, you know, at least, you know, you're doing something for therapeutic benefit. So anyway, if you're in a situation like that, if you're in a bad spot and you feel like that things are so bad that you just can't go on, then you need to tell somebody. You know, people these days, they seem like they're afraid to tell people that they're struggling with something. But if you ever watch how many people tune into the Kardashians or soap operas or Honey Boo Boo or any of these other shows like that on TV, you'll realize real quick that people like hearing about bad news. They like problems. You know, I personally don't get into all that, but there's plenty of people that like to hear about other people's problems and see them. So don't feel like you're imposing on somebody if you just got to tell somebody, or tell more than one person, say, hey, I'm not doing good. I'm having issues. This is not right, or I think it's not right. So anyway, I didn't want to talk a lot about that or end this on a sad note. You know, it is sad, and you know, the guy, you can't figure people out sometimes. You can't read them real good, I guess, because he let on, apparently to no one on YouTube, that he was having problems and all that. So anyway, well, we will get back into this when I get back in town. We're going to put on that temperature gauge and do that, and I got other stuff going on. Just having to wait right now. This has to come first. Instead of first in line, I got to do something about the brown car. This thing needs brakes repaired on it. So, But we'll get there. We'll get there. We're having nice weather so far, so a little hot, but it's nice. So I will see you on the next one. And you know what the man in New York says? Go down there and ring that bell. Leave a comment, criticize me, compliment me. You don't have to compliment me if you don't want to. But anyway, do what you do. And I'm going to modify his sign off a little bit. I'm going to say, just because I do it doesn't mean you should do it. See you guys.